All right. So we are looking at our final lesson here in PFT 101, where we are going to be covering strength assessments. So like I said, the PowerPoint keeps these in, they call it the end of performance assessments, which makes sense because it really is. But we are going to be looking at strength assessments. So these are 1 rep max assessments. These are probably the most optional assessment that you can do with your clients. You know, like, and they really don't even apply to most of your clients unless you are doing like a strength routine. You know, like every routine we've built so far in this course have been built around just like warm-ups and movement preps, which, you know, that actually might be enough for if you're working in like a corrective environment, that might be like your entire bread and butter, you know. You know, your client might be hiring you to do, you know, little 30-minute corrective exercise sessions rather than like full-on workouts, because maybe they already do like a workout that they're into, or maybe they just want to get like regularly active. They go on like walks, you know, but we're working on like just a little bit of stuff for, you know, their core strength and lumbopelvic hip complex, right? Which is kind of where we spend most of our time. You know, we do spend most of our time kind of in the core. And so like, you know, if you're doing corrective stuff, that's kind of the end of it. But let's say you are doing like a full-on routine, right? And I'll just pull up one of our old routines here. There, what do I got? Is that one? Yeah. So here's kind of a very kind of simple, basic routine here. You can see this is a client who doesn't have like a lot of postural distortions. This is Jim. And he really just has like really tight hamstrings, you know? And so we're going to foam roll the hamstrings. We're going to do a little bit of hamstring stretching. And then we're going to dive right into sort of our workouts here. Prone iso abs, we go with the classic plank, single leg balance. That's about as basic as it gets for a balance exercise. And then squat jump to stabilization. So real, you know, simple there as well. But then he's got a resistance section, right? This guy's, you know, spending most of his time, he's going to do a ball squat curled to press. And I know not everybody has these exercises memorized, but I'm just moving through them. A ball chest press, a ball row, a single leg shoulder press, a single leg bicep curl, a ball tricep extension, and a single leg deadlift, Romanian deadlift. So a lot of single leg stuff, right? We've got a total body exercise, a chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and legs. You know, we were really just kind of working our way through like a total full body routine, hitting 1 muscle per group. Probably have this client, if I was doing this, I'd probably have them do it 3 days per week. And that way, you know, they're getting enough stress on the body to see growth, but not enough stress to cause like an overuse injury or anything like that. And he's doing 3 sets of 15 for everything. So this is a pretty simple, basic routine, right? Well, tying this back to our conversation that we're having today, if you had a client like this, do you think it's really vital to do like a 1 rep max assessment? Not really, right? Like he's doing all these unstable exercises and he's all doing like dumbbells, you know? And that's great for building stability. But if I'm testing like his 1 rep max, these aren't the kind of things that are really going to improve his 1 rep max. So maybe this is a very optional category of assessments. This may not necessarily be an assessment type that you do with every single client. But let's take a look at a different client here. Or let's take a look at Bob here. Let's say that Bob is, you know, sort of moving into a slightly more advanced routine. Let's say he's trying to put on some muscle, right? So now we've got like a strength style hypertrophy routine. So now we're still working on his hamstrings, but now instead we're going to do some slightly different core exercises. We're doing a crunch, a squat touchdown, a squat jump instead of a squat jump to stabilization. So things got a little bit tougher. And now he's doing 4 sets instead of 3, but his repetitions are all the way down to 8. So his reps went low, which means he's lifting much, much, much heavier. And sure enough, you'll see we're doing like a lunge to 2-arm dumbbell press for like our total body exercise. That's nice and heavy. But then it's like a bench press, a bent over row, a military press, a deadlift. All of these things are very, very strength-based exercises. So because they're very strength-based exercises, I need to make sure that I am giving them enough like resistance, enough weight to make the to make the exercise challenging, right? Which means I need to know what their 1 rep max potential is. I need to know how strong they are so that I can work at a percentage of that maximum, effort, total body, or not total body, but maximum effort strength. So does that make sense, everybody? Does everybody see the sort of the purpose here?
Yep, got it.
All righty. So first one we're going to look at. So they only have 2 in your textbook. And for the record, it doesn't mean that these are the only 2 strength assessments you can do. You can literally do a strength assessment with, honestly, you could do it with any exercise in the gym. You should never do it with a stabilization exercise. Like you should never do it if your client is on a ball or standing on one leg or something like that. If that's the case, don't do stabilization exercises like that. But if you're doing like a deadlift exercise, especially, strength assessments are terrific. They're very easy to kind of test there. Oh, Lorianne, we got 2 of you.
Yeah, something's wrong with my computer.
Oh, no problem.
I can't even turn it off.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah, it's just making this noise. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah, I can.
I don't know what's going on with it.
I have no idea.
I can't even turn it off. Okay, there's gonna be 2 of me. Double trouble.
No problem. Huck it under the bed.
Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right. So if we're taking a look at our strength assessments, right? Like I said, you can really do these with any exercise you want, as long as it's like a stable, safe exercise, and I wouldn't do it with like an explosive exercise either. So really, strength assessments, which fits considering that they're called strength assessments. So, strength exercises, right? So typically barbell based, although you could do dumbbells, but typically, yeah, barbells are going to be where we kind of do most of these exercises, or you could do them on a machine. Let's say you're at the gym and you're doing like that chest press machine, you're pulling a pin and just making it a little bit heavier every time. You could do performance assessments like bench press assessments on those machines. If you wanted to know like, what percentage of your clients 1 rep max to work at. So we need to kind of know how to kind of gauge this so we make sure our client is working as hard as they are sort of able, right? Because we are always working at some percentage of our 1 rep max. If I'm doing around 8 repetitions, I should be lifting around 80% of my 1 rep max. If I were doing around 10 repetitions, about 82, I'm sorry, not 82, about 78%. And if I'm doing about 12 repetitions, about 75%. But if I'm doing like 5 repetitions, that's about 85% of my 1 rep max. 3 repetitions, that's around 90. 2 repetitions, about 95. And 1 rep is your 100% of your 1 rep max. So these are pretty valuable numbers to have. So we make sure that we are taking out the guesswork, right? We don't waste a set by saying, how is that? And your client's like, that's actually pretty easy, right? And then like we wasted a set in our routine, your client rests, you add a little bit of weight randomly, and then they try again. And it's like, how was that? And they're like, that was easy too, right? And then all of a sudden you're 2 sets in, you haven't really fired up the right weight. So strength assessments, also known as 1 rep max assessments, are fitness assessments that are designed to assess upper body and lower body strength in order to help fitness professionals determine what poundage to give your clientele. So these are assessments that are really going to help us determine the most appropriate intensity for our clients, right? So looking at it, looking at the bench press assessment, which by the way, is not going to be called the bench press assessment in your textbook. It is going to be called the upper extremity strength assessment, is determined to estimate the 1 repetition max for training and intensity purposes, right? Now, like I said, this is an advanced assessment. It may not be suitable for every single client that you have. If your client doesn't have strength goals, you don't need to do this. This is a waste of your time, you know? If they are working on stabilization, don't spend all day, you know, testing out their maximum strength. But what you're going to do is you're going to position your client on a bench, lying on their back, feet pointed straight ahead, and their back in a neutral position. So they're not, don't let them arch their back, don't let them turn their feet out, you know, don't let them tuck their feet in. You'll see a lot of bad habits when it comes to the bench press. People will rest their feet too far back here. You want to make sure that, like, you know, it's basically positioned right under the knees. And then you're going to instruct them to warm up with a light weight. Now, because this is a 1 rep max assessment, we need to make sure that we are doing this slowly and safely. So you're going to take and have them do like a light weight for about 8 to 10 repetitions, and then give them about 1 minute of rest. So we take it pretty easy on them in the beginning. That's really just to kind of get the gears, you know, grease the hinge a little, and then, you know, kind of get them warmed up. Then what you're going to do is you're going to add, and this is the 2 things that you guys got to remember, 10 to 20 pounds or 5 to 10% of the initial load, and have them do 3 to 5 more repetitions. Okay. So you're going to have them do 3 to 5 repetitions, and then you're going to rest 2 minutes. So you're going to start a timer, right? Wait 2 minutes. Then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of repeat that process and add another 10 to 20 pounds, or, you know, 5 to 10% of the initial load. Perform another 3 to 5 repetitions, and you're going to repeat that process until your client can no longer complete even 1 repetition. So let's say, now, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, let's say for the sake of argument, you are a little bit worried about being able to spot your client. You know, maybe they're lifting a really heavy amount of weight, and you're a little worried that you won't be able to kind of help them get that bar back into the right place. Aside from what we're teaching you in this assessment and stuff, if you are worried about that, you could always calculate it based on maybe their 6 repetition max or their 8 repetition max. You know, you could have them do 8 repetitions and then rest 2 minutes and then repeat for another 8 repetitions until eventually they, you know, they're like, oh, I can only do, you know, 4 of these, right? And so you would know that's about their 4 rep max. And then there are calculators out there that look like this. Let's say your client lifted 200 pounds, right? And they were able to do 8 repetitions, okay? If I hit this little calculator here, it estimates that our 1 rep max is about 248 pounds, which means if I wanted to do 12 reps, I'd throw 173 pounds on it. If I want to do 4 reps, I'd throw 225 pounds on there, right? If they did 200 pounds for 2 reps, well, then their 1 rep max is, you know, going to be 205. Their, you know, 12 rep max is about 144. So, you know, there are calculators out there. So if you are worried about having your client be able to lift a weight that you aren't comfortable like spotting them on, you can always modify the assessment rather than having them do, you know, working their way to their true 1 rep max. You could have them work to their 8 rep max and then use a conversion calculator. So instruct them to do the bench press, add 5 to 10%, and then repeat, and then have them rest for 2 minutes. And you're going to repeat until they eventually cannot do anymore, you know? And that's why this is that's another reason why this is a very, very, very optional assessment. This takes a lot of time. It really does kind of eat up a pretty good chunk of your session time, especially if you are doing like a full total body strength assessment. A lot of times I won't get into strength assessments until I've been working with my client for a little while, and they know how to, move through some of these. They've started to get familiar with like our reassessment process, where it's like, maybe I'm training, Andres, right? And I'm like, hey, we've been working together for 4 weeks now. Let's do a reassessment. So we redo his body weight, his body fat percentage, and maybe he's been checking those things weekly because they're easy to check, right? That doesn't take a lot of time. But now it's like, we're going to do the full kit and caboodle, go through the assessment process. Let's see how, your cardio is doing. So we have him do another Rockport walk test, just like the first time, right? And it's like, hey, your VO2 went up by 5, that's a substantial improvement in 4 weeks. And then we have him do the overhead squat again. And it's like the knees aren't caving in quite as much. We have him do the pushing and pulling, and it's like, that's looking fine. That moved a lot quicker. We do all of his circumference measurements again. Because he's a little bit more familiar with these things, he's already done them once. I can spend less time explaining things. He's going to be a lot more comfortable going through them. And we're going to move a little bit more quickly, right? Once I can, and this is something that you kind of gauge as the trainer, once I can kind of move through that process pretty quickly with my client because they're familiar enough and we've gone through it enough together, that I have like a good chunk of time left. Well, it's like, all right, well, this is a reassessment session. We have an hour. We got through all that other stuff in about 30 minutes this time because we've been moving pretty quickly. We got about a half hour left. Let's go pick 2 major strength assessments and take a look at like what your 1 rep max is, because it'll honestly take 15 to 20 minutes sometimes for a single assessment if you are moving slowly and safely. I know some of you guys out there might be thinking, I've done 1 rep max testing and it certainly didn't take 15 minutes. Yeah, you can always jump pretty heavy on the weight initially. Like if you ask your client, like, how much can you bench? And they're like, oh, I don't know, about 155. And it's like, great. And you throw like 145 pounds on the bar and be like, all right, well, let's see what you can do. And then we start raising it up from there. You could do that. It is not illegal for you to do that. And it is well within the realm of possibility. However, it's definitely not the safest way to do it. So because of that, we are, we're trying to do this in the safest way possible. So a 5 to 10% increase with 2 minutes rest between rounds is the safest method. Lorianne, do you have a question?
Yeah. So every time in between the 2 minutes, you're adding another 5 to 10% each time?
Yep. That's how it works.
Okay. All right.
And eventually they'll cap out. Eventually, they're going to fail and you're going to bail them out and you can grab that bar and put it back on their weight and on the rack. And, that's how it works. So 5 to 10%. So, and let's say it's not the bench press. Maybe they don't care about their bench press. Maybe they're like, I want to know how much I can bent over row. The protocol is the same, right? This is why they only give you 2 options. You could do like I said, you could do a 1 rep max assessment with literally any barbell or machine-based exercise in the entire gym if you wanted to. NASM's given us 2 examples. They're giving us the bench press. It kind of represents all upper body exercises. Maybe they're doing a military press, right? Maybe, like I said, maybe they're doing a bent over row. Maybe they're doing an incline chest press. I don't know why you would care about your 1 rep max on that. You can kind of figure it out based on your regular bench pretty closely, or a decline bench or something like that. Any of those exercises, guys, you could test your 1 rep max on any of them. But that is sort of our protocol that we're looking there. This is meant to represent all of the upper body ones. So 5 to 10%, 3 to 5 repetitions, rest 2 minutes. Okay. The next one, not a lot of explaining happening here either. This one's pretty basic, especially after we've already done the bench press. The next one is our squat assessment, which is the lower extremity strength assessment. And like I said, you'll see they don't call it the squat assessment. And the demo we're seeing here is a squat assessment. The demo that we saw was a bench press assessment, but it's an upper extremity strength assessment. It could be any upper body exercise. The same thing is true here in our squat assessment. It is just a placeholder for all of the leg-based exercises. Could this be a deadlift? Yeah, absolutely. Could this be a hang clean? Yeah, sure, why not? Could it be a split line or just a barbell, split squat? Yeah, totally. But the example we've got here is a squat assessment. So this is designed to estimate the 1 repetition maximum for training intensity purposes. So again, if you're going to look for test question answers, we got to look at this information that we've got and sort of determine, how would a question be written based on this information? How are they going to word you a multiple choice question? Well, it's going to be something like the what it is, right? The definition's always a good one, right? Blank is designed to estimate the 1 repetition maximum for intensity purposes. And that'd be a strength assessment in general. Or if it said, for lower body, it'd be like, okay, well, that's a squat assessment or a lower extremity strength assessment. So again, very advanced, may not be suitable for all clients. Got to remember that. But what you're going to do for the barbell one, or for the barbell squat here, you're going to position standing with a bar on his or her back, feet pointed straight ahead, knees in line with toes. That's NASM's protocol for really everything. For the record, if you are the type of coach who appreciates a slight external rotation in the feet, because that does put your it does put your femur into an ideal position here. Not everybody's pelvis is going to be the same. Some people, maybe they do actually put their feet straight forward, but generally, we want to have an ever so slight angled, toe turn out situation. That's going to put the femoral head in the socket a little bit more ideally, right? This is kind of where most people will sit, right around 30 degrees. 45 tends to be a little bit too much for most people, but it could be appropriate depending on, what their femur is shaped like. Or maybe even 15 degrees, maybe that seems a little bit narrow to me. But that's sort of what we look for, when you're doing an overhead squat. Don't get me wrong, you want the toes forward, right? And you can actually see what we're saying here. To screen your client, yeah, toes forward. We're trying to see how they move in a body weight squat. But with a barbell squat, if you want to coach it at a 30-degree angle there and drive the knees wider, that's totally okay, guys. That's how I coach a barbell squat. That's how most people coach a barbell squat. It's based on your client for sure. There's no magic number. A lot of trainers will say it's always 30 degrees. Nah, everybody's femur is a little bit different. For me, it's a little bit less. I don't do quite as much external rotation. Anyway, if you're doing that on a strength assessment, go for it. If it's an overhead squat, toes forward, okay? But NASM, just kind of in the whole textbook, anytime they're talking about squatting, they're always just saying feet shoulder width apart, toes pointed straight ahead, Anyway, low back should be in a neutral position. Don't let your client arch beforehand. And you're going to instruct them to perform 3 to 5 reps with perfect, that should say perfect form. And then you'll see here, it says you're going to add 20 to 40 pounds. That's still only 5 to 10% of the initial load. Most people are about twice as strong in their lower body as they are in their upper body. Most people, for the record, this is not always true. So for those of you who might be thinking, well, which number do I pay attention to? Pay attention to the percentage. I've definitely had clients, usually male clients, who have bench pressed plenty of times. And so their bench press strength is pretty high. but then they've never done like literally anything else. And so, you know, the first time they ever do a barbell squat, it's a real struggle. Not everybody can squat as much as they bend. You should be able to. For the record, guys, your legs should be much stronger than your chest. But it's not always true for all your clients. So you will generally see it's about 20 to 40 pounds in someone who's a very, you know, pretty balanced. But again, it's just 5 to 10% of the initial load. Rest 2 minutes and repeat. And there are conversion charts. Like I said, you know, your textbook doesn't have a, you know, calculate. It's not a magic textbook with a calculator built into it, but there are conversion charts. So there's the percentage 1RM conversion chart. And you'll see it, actually, here it is by NASM. You'll see it looks like this. So again, let's say you did, you lifted, we'll say 200 pounds, right? Well, if you lifted 200 pounds for, 200 pounds is over here. If you did 200 pounds, right? Then your client's 10 repetition max is 267. Their 9 repetition max is 258. 8 repetition max, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh yeah. And then we knew what their one was, right? So, you know, that's, you're basically counting out like how many reps you did, right? And you can see these numbers go pretty freaking high. You know, if you're getting into like a real true freaking power lifter here. So if they did 25 pounds 10 times, right? That means that they're going to be pretty substantially stronger than 25 pounds. So their 1 rep max is about 33. So that's how this little chart works. Personally, guys, I haven't looked at that. I look at that chart whenever I teach these lectures, but no other times. For the most part, you know, there is an app on everyone's phone. You can literally get on the App Store, type in 1RM calculator, 1RM calculator, and it will literally pull up, you know, there's a million apps out there. And you just say like, you know, you did 200 pounds and you did it for 5 reps. Well, your 1 rep max is 225. And then here's your percentages. If you wanted to say, okay, well, I want to work at 75% of my 1 rep max, there you go, 169. I want to work at 50%, great, 113. So it'll do all the math for you. Everybody download that calculator. It is very, very, very handy. So reviewing, honestly, that's about all of our new assessments here, but reviewing that information to make sure it's really clear. The things to pay attention to is they call it your upper extremity strength assessment, which is designed to estimate your 1 repetition max for training intensity purposes of upper extremity exercises. Your lower extremity strength assessment, same definition, right? Designed to estimate the 1 repetition max for training intensity purposes of lower body stuff. It's 5 to 10% of your initial load. Generally, that's going to be about 10 to 20 pounds for upper body stuff, or it's going to be about 20 to 40 pounds for lower body stuff. So questions on any of that?
What is the name of the calculator?
What's that? What is it called? Oh, 1RM calculator. It stands for 1 rep max. Okay, thanks. Yeah. You could also, I mean, honestly, Lorian, if you looked 1 rep max calculator, it'll probably pull it up. I shouldn't say, I'm just giving you the short and kind of easier to Google version. But I'm sure if you typed in 1 rep max calculator, I'm sure you get the same thing. So yeah, guys, that's all of chapter 6. Biggest chapter in the whole textbook, if I think. And we got all the way through it in a couple days. So we got one last postural distortion to take a look at. We do need to take a look here at the excessive forward lean here. Day 9. Right? Where'd I put it? Yeah, no, day 9. All right. I got to separate this out and resend this to you guys. But let's look at a client with excessive forward lean. So just to review really quickly, because I do want to make sure that you guys see there's a connection here. There's kind of a connection between a client with a low back arch, that anterior tilt, and excessive forward lean. They're actually very similar to each other. So when we look at the excessive forward, when we look at the low back arch, right? When we look at that excessive arching that happens, right? The anterior pelvic tilt, or we sometimes call it lordosis, right? You know, what that's going to be are, you know, we call it the lower cross situation, right? We see weak abdominal muscles. That's going to be your transverse abdominis. And we also see weak gluteus muscles, right? The muscles that pull your pelvis backwards. And we see tight psoas muscles, which are hip flexors that pull the pelvis downwards. And we see tight erector spinae muscles, which are low back muscles that pull up like this, right? So that's what's moving the pelvis. But sometimes that's not what happens. Sometimes we see a client who just leans forward like crazy during their squat, right? They're not lining up very well. So you'll see something that kind of looks like this. Now, how can you tell if there is an excessive forward lean? How do you spot it? You know, like if we're looking at it, you know, sometimes you'll look at someone and be like, yeah, maybe that's just how they squat. Their chest drops a little bit. How do you know that this is excessive? Well, what you're going to want to do, and you can kind of see they've done it in this picture here, optimal squat patterns, guys, you should be able to draw a line from their ankle that travels up through their knee, and you want to draw a line that travels from their pelvis that travels up through their body. Those two lines should never cross. They should be parallel. So they're stacked kind of like this, and then as you squat, they stay parallel to one another, right? Here, the lines are crossing. Right. There is also a very rare, you know, one of the ways to sometimes see like a low back arch is you also have an inadequate forward lean, although NASM doesn't actually have this in the textbook. You'll hear people talk, if you ever watch videos, sometimes you'll hear people talk about this. And this is the exact same. Yeah, it's just, there's not going to be a picture on the internet. This doesn't happen as often, but sometimes you'll see an inadequate forward lean where they will also cross over each other. So you'll see this version here, right? Like she's coming down here and then like the shins are coming way too far forward. So instead of like these lines crossing each other up here, they'll cross each other down here. You'll see too much of that version. Both are not great, you know. Her upper body is too upright here. That's usually associated with like low back rounding. You will see this more commonly in clients who have really tight hamstring muscles rather than clients who have tight hip flexors. So what's happening here in the excessive lean? Well, there's really two problems. This is why this is on the last day here, because there's going to be two causes to this problem. So let's pull up our list, right? Let's go to NASM's download page and pull up the list in your textbook. Downloads, posture assessments, right? And take a look at the excessive forward trunk lean, right? So what we're going to see as our overactive muscles here, there's going to be some very weird choices, or at least choices that don't seem like they're associated with each other, and they're not. But we're going to see the soleus and gastrocnemius. So now we're seeing the calf muscles, right? So the calves are overactive. And then we also see the hip flexors, which usually cause the anterior tilt, right? We see the rectus abdominis, which is your abdominal muscles, right? And we see the external obliques, which are also abdominal muscles. So now we got a really interesting list of overactive muscles here, right? It's the abs, the hip flexors, and the calves. So we look at this person here, abs, hip flexors, calves. That's all over the place. It's all over the map, right? And that's because there are two separate things that cause the excessive lean. They're not always associated with one another. So the two causes of an excessive lean are either ankle dysfunction or lumbopelvic hip dysfunction. Not saying it couldn't be a little bit of both, but generally it's either going to be a lumbopelvic problem or an ankle problem. How the heck do we separate and figure out which is which? Like if I've got a client who's leaning forward, I'm like, oh man, is it tight calves or is it tight hips and abs? Is there hips and abs? Like, you know, are they just trying to squat and then like this stuff is just pulling? So they go and squat like this? Or is it they're having so much ankle dysfunction that as they squat, their calves are so tight that they feel like they're falling backwards. So instead what they have to do is they just have to drop their chest down and now their ankle doesn't have to dorsiflex, right? Well, I can figure this out by modifying the overhead squat. And what I can do is I can take my client and I can put their heels on a couple plates. Now what that does, if I put their plates on heels, is that basically takes the stretch away from their gastrocnemius and their soleus. Now he is in plantar flexion. It's almost like he's wearing high heels, right? So because he's in plantar flexion now, these muscles no longer have to stretch. And that's exactly, you know, what they don't want to do, right? They're overactive muscles. And sure enough, his squat looks much, much, much better now. So in this version, look at the angle here, right? Here, I'll even copy this image. Let's see here. We'll go to paint here. We'll draw our own lines. Okay. Put this in red, kind of like they did there. If we draw a line right here and we look at this angle, like that's kind of it's almost a 90-degree angle, right? But if we draw this line over here, I kind of cheated on that. Let's go like more like this. We can see it's a it's not a crazy sharper angle, right? But it's definitely sharper than it was. Like this is practically 90 degrees. The shins are actually able to travel forward. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to sit back better and put the pressure onto here. And now we are seeing like these lines are much, much more parallel than they were in our first version, where here they're going to cross over each other, right? Like this is totally going to cross over this. That's not what we want, right? We want them to be nice and parallel and kind of travel forever. So if we elevated our client's heels and all of a sudden their squat looks incredible, and it's like, that fixed it. That fixed our problem, right? All we did was just put the heels up and bam, it fixed everything. Then we know that the real problem here are the ankles, right? And you can see there's a million people online who are doing this heel thing, right? See here, she's leaning forward, right? And that's actually, God, we should have pulled her up. Look at this. Look at the angle of her tibia. Look at the angle of her shin here. In this version, it's really leaning forward. And here, it's practically upright. So when we elevate the heels, if the problem goes away and all of a sudden it's fixed, right, then we know that their calves are what are causing this excessive tightness, okay? So we know that it's going to be with the excessive trunk lean. We know that it's going to be the soleus, and it's going to be the gastrocnemius, okay? Both of these muscles right here. Now, let's say you elevate their heels and they still lean forward, right? You elevated their heels, you put them up on plates, and it did nothing, right? They still just squat kind of like this. Then we know, all right, the fixing the calf thing, it didn't help, right? They have lumbopelvic hip dysfunction. Then we know our overactive muscles are going to be the hip flexors, which are actively pulling the chest down, right? Particularly the psoas muscles, right? Which are attached to the actual spine. So they're pulling the client forward. And we see the rectus abdominis. Remember, the rectus abdominis is your six-pack muscles, right? Right there on the front. That makes sense, right? It's pulling us down. And then we do see the external obliques. The external oblique muscles are just like the rectus abdominis. They live on the side. They are in charge of, you know, this rotational movement. That's what your obliques do, but they also do a little bit of this, but they also do a little bit of crunching. Like here's here, you want to know a dirty secret, guys? I know that like a lot of people who are like really getting beach ready, you know, you start to kind of reveal the abs a little bit. You start to get like the classic six pack. But for a lot of people who have gotten their six pack, the next, like, you know, the step above that, the next step is to get your obliques to come in, you know. Here's a dirty secret. If you do regular old crunches, your obliques will actually come in pretty well. Don't get me wrong. There are absolutely external oblique exercises. There are Russian twists, there's wood chops and things like that. But your external obliques, I know we think of them as just like, yeah, they're my rotator muscles. They are, but they also assist in regular old classic spinal flexion, just like your rectus abdominis does. So it's easy to kind of separate these into, you know, what they're kind of famous for. Your rectus abdominis is obviously famous for crunching, and your obliques are obviously famous for twisting. But both of those muscles do a little bit of each of those things. Just like, you know, Lorianne earlier, well, everybody, earlier I mentioned you've got your three deltoid muscles, right? You get the one in the front that goes to the front, the one on the side that goes to the side. Those two kind of help each other, you know, like it's not like my side one's doing nothing when I go here. My medial deltoid's assisting with that a little bit, you know, but yes, your external obliques are definitely going to also pull you forward just like your abs did. So we see the hip flexors in the front that are going to be very tight. We see the rectus abdominis in the front. It's going to be very tight. And we see the external obliques in the front, slightly off to the side, and it's going to be really tight. So now we know these muscles are overactive, okay? So this problem, this problem has two causes, and you need to be able to separate which is which. So if you ever see a client who has an excessive forward lean, you need to take your overhead squat one step further and elevate their heels. If you elevate their heels and the problem goes away, now you figured out that it's the calves. If you elevate the heels and the problem persists, well, then you figured out that it's the hips and the abs, which is why this was initially put together with our low back arch program, because they're kind of similar to each other. So we've got an example, except, oh wait, actually, I just realized I totally forgot to do the underactive list. Sorry. So now it's like, okay, that's the overactive tight stuff, right? Let's flip to the other side of the joint. What is the opposite of your soleus and gastrocnemius? Now, they're not putting it on here, which is kind of frustrating, but they didn't put this on the list. But I will tell you, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think they just have it misaligned. Yeah, I think these should just actually be down here. We'll do it ourselves. So the opposite of your gastrocnemius is going to be your anterior tibialis muscles, okay? So here we can kind of see the back of the calf, and here we can see the front of your shin, right? Well, if your gastrocnemius does plantar flexion, it points your toe away, your anterior tibialis does dorsiflexion. It pulls your toes back towards you, okay? So that is what we are going to see as the direct antagonist there. Oh, excuse me. So your anterior tibialis is the little tiny muscle in the front of the shin. You can actually feel it if you place your hand on your shin and you pull your toes back. You'll feel that muscle actually contract pretty easily. It's a pretty superficial muscle, so it's easy to feel. But it lives right here. It lives from the top of the tibia there, and it runs all the way down and it grabs your foot, which is why when it pulls your toes back towards you. So if your client has excessive plantar flexion, which is that toe point, right? They're doing way too much of this. The calf muscles, which are responsible for that, are too tight versus dorsiflexion, which is your anterior tibialis. And then there's one other one, which is your posterior tibialis. And your posterior tibialis is pretty similar, except that it runs slightly down to the inside here. Wow, I'm not getting a very good picture of this. There we go. So your posterior tibialis does live on the posterior compartment, but it runs to and grabs in kind of a similar area to your anterior tibialis. So both of these muscles will be weakened, which are the muscles that we want to strengthen. So how do you strengthen your anterior tibialis? We're going to do this exercise right here.
This is Brendan the
Whoa.
Bush Institute. In this video, I'm going to show you guys my favorite tibialis anterior activation exercise. I'm going to have my friend Melissa come out. She's going to help me demonstrate this exercise, and you'll see how easy the setup is on this one. We're going to use one of these monster bands, which I think you guys know as pull-up assist bands. I tend to use the Sirius steel bands. I like them. They're good, high-quality bands. We're going to just go ahead and slip knot around the bottom leg of the table here. And then I just need to flop this over the top of her foot, just like so. Now, notice guys, I have this at the base of her foot and not at the top of her foot. I understand that the top of her foot would create a larger lever and make for more resistance, but you guys have to think about your tarsal joints, which can be a little sensitive, especially to this type of pressure. We don't want to create dysfunction trying to fix dysfunction. Now, if you guys didn't have a treatment table, the technique is totally the same. What you would do is you would hook a band to a heavy piece of equipment at the floor level. The only thing you're going to have to do is probably elevate the heel on something like a foam roll, because if you don't have just a little bit of a downward angle on this band, it tends to flop off the foot every time you go into this plantar flex relaxed state of this exercise. Now let's talk about activation exercise in general. We need to figure out what joint actions this muscle does, and then figure out how to reciprocally inhibit those muscles that become synergistically dominant when this muscle becomes inhibited. So we have the tibialis anterior does inversion and dorsiflexion. That's pretty easy to do. That's going to be foot up and in. And in this case, we are going to focus more on dorsiflexion than inversion. If we focus too much on inversion, we tend to not be able to dorsiflex as well. And since we tend to lose dorsiflexion, I really want to focus on dorsiflexion and try to get it back. Now, the overactive synergists for the tibialis anterior are the long toe extensors, especially that extensor digitorum longus, which also everts and pronates the foot. So that muscle tends to want to contribute to our pes planus or functional flat-footedness. You guys know it as feet flattened on the overhead squat assessment. The way we're going to get our long toe extensors out of the movement is toe flexion. right? So we're just going to be kind of clever. We're going to use their joint actions at the toes to inhibit what we're going to do at the ankle.
This is a really kind of advanced note, by the way, but like what he's talking about right here, it's a night and day difference. It's really awesome. I will not always do this with every single client. If I know that like neuromuscular control can be a little bit of a problem sometimes, I will simply start with just having them do just regular old dorsiflexion. But if I really want to make sure they're not using any other muscles to kind of help, what you're going to see is he's just going to give the little note to just kind of slightly curl the toes before he does this activation technique. And so he's ensuring that synergists can't help.
Now the tricky part is getting Melissa to go foot up and in while her toes go down. It's kind of the equivalent of this movement with the foot, right? So you're going to pull up and in and toes down, and she's practiced this a little bit, so this isn't too bad for her, and then she can just relax everything as she goes down. She doesn't have to keep her toes curled as she goes down, right? So foot up and in, toes down, and then she can relax it. Now, tempo markings for activation exercise are either 4-2-2, concentrating on the eccentric, or 2-4-2, concentrating on end range. Again, since dorsiflexion is something we tend to lose, and tibialis anterior activation will help me keep it, I tend to use that 2-4-2 count on this exercise and really make people focus at the top. I want you to try to get as much dorsiflexion as you possibly can, right? Get it. All right. Because if I've just done a lot of mobility work with her, right, I want good carryover. I want her to keep that dorsiflexion for a long time, so hopefully we keep making progress over time. Good, pull up and in. Good, pull up and in. Good.
All right, so anyway, this video actually goes on a lot longer, and there is actually more to talk about, but that's basically how we're going to kind of activate that anterior tibialis, okay? I love this video. It's kind of a bonus video I wanted to show you. If you ever get a chance, these Brent Brookbush videos, Brookbush Institute, is some of the best personal training, physical therapy information available on the internet. This, along with Squat University, are my two like favorite channels for postural stuff.
What was that called again?
The Brookbush Institute. Or Brent Brookbush is the guy's name. Mo knew him. I think they went to a similar school or something like that, which is kind of cool. But he is a freaking guru, man. They just came out with their own certification. I doubt that it's accepted by most gyms because it's still very new. But you know, with this guy's genius, I wouldn't be surprised if he gives NASM a run for its money in 15, 20 years. So anyway, that's an anterior tibialis. Let's go ahead and take a look here though, at NASM's approach to the excessive lean. Is it this one? It's not the right one. Where the heck? Oh, you know what? No, it's in the feet turnout stuff. Sorry. So looking at the ankle, we do want to activate the anterior and posterior tibialis. Now, this is a quick fix for the feet turning out, but I want to show you Rick's approach here. He's going to talk about those tight calf muscles. So I'm going to kind of skip to, rather than talking about the external rotation part, we're going to talk about how to turn the ankles on here. So we're going to kind of skip around in this video a little bit. But here he's going to first talk about like the inhibiting. We got to inhibit the calf muscles, right? Those are the overactive ones. So here we go.
Her functioning in normal movement patterns, not just an isolated movement pattern. So Annie, let's get started. So we're just going to show you what to do on the right side. Now, this is going to be the highlight version. So Annie's going to do is she's going to release these calves, keep the foot completely relaxed, and she's going to do a search and destroy. So she's going to roll through, try to find out where those tense spots are. Now what she's done is she's taken the other leg, added it on top, put some weight on it, put a little bit of pressure on it. Now she's lifted up her backside. She's going to put a little more pressure on it, but make sure these muscles stay relaxed in the feet. Right? Now once Annie finds that spot, I'm going to have her just rest her backside down and then she can take that top leg and put some additional pressure on it, so that way she's not holding herself up the entire time. Some of your clients, like Annie, will be able to do it. Some of the clients not going to be able to do it. Might hurt people's wrists, so just have a seat when you do this. That's what I do. So now she's gone through the release, the soleus, the gastrocnemius release. Normally, you'd look for at least 2 spots released for 30 seconds. Let's assume that we've done that. Hop up and let's get some stretching in. So we're going to do a stretch specifically for the calves here. So Annie's going to go into that stretch. Now realize that her feet turn out. So when she stretches, that foot's going to have to be straight ahead, maybe even slightly internally rotated, because if it's short this way, then we're going to lengthen it more by straightening it up. So let's keep it in a neutral position. And what Annie can do here is that normally should be up against a wall or should be on a slant board, so we're just giving you the visual. What I want you to do, go ahead and press into me if you need to, lean forward. She's going to drive the heel into the ground. You're going to lock out your knee, and then, strangely, but this works, she's going to squeeze her glute. So get that butt cheek squeezed, glutes tight, quads tight, heel drives down. And it's interesting, the glute squeeze it actually helps her to supinate, which gets her out of pronation. So we're going to go through this, and it's just a perfect example of how connected the body is, right? So glutes tight, quads tight, heel driven down. She's released that muscle for 30 seconds.
So he's loosening up the calves here, right? Like he's doing, you can see he's, by pulling her tibia forward like this, that puts it into dorsiflexion, which is the exact opposite of that plantar flexion that the calf muscles want to perform. So whether your client is an excessive leaner or a foot turner outer, the protocol is the same. We're going to turn the calves off. Foam rolling first, stretching second.
Let's go into some activations. So the activation, she's going to stay on that same foot. And I'm going to have Annie now go into, let's do an isolated activation, and then we'll do an integrated activation. So go ahead and let's drop you down. Put your foot on the roller. And she's going to do an activation for her anterior tibialis. So the tibia is this bone right here. Anterior tibialis is this muscle. You can see it on this leg. So that muscle activates by going into dorsiflexion and inversion. So this is eversion, this is inversion. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to resist that. So I'm going to resist dorsiflexion, which is the foot going up, and inversion. So I'm pulling at this angle. I'm also holding her ankle because I don't want to pull this direction and make her hip work, so I'm just going to stabilize it. Go ahead and slowly come down and then back up. Good. So that is your anterior tib activation. Your posterior tib activation is plantar flexion with inversion. So she's going this direction. So again, I'm going to hold her foot and I'm pulling against the inversion. So go ahead and slowly undo it. And go ahead and plantar flex and invert. Good. Go one more time, invert, more, squeeze it. Now hold it there, don't let me move you. And slowly come with me, so she's getting the eccentric activation here. And relax. So now that we've done some isolated activation.
Okay, so that is how, and the rest of this isn't quite relevant to us. So that's how you're gonna sort of isolately and activate those muscles, right? The opposite of your soleus and gastrocnemius, you're going to do that by pulling your toes back, or you can do a little bit of like that inward toe pull as well, right? You saw that he was doing a version where he had her pull straight back, and he had another version where he had her scoop into inversion, right? So she was scooping like this. So that's how we're going to activate the anterior and the posterior tibialis muscles. Okay. So integrating those into like your workout can be a little bit challenging because it's like, it's something that you would do in a corrective routine for sure, but it's like, that doesn't work your core. It doesn't really work your balance at all. Right. So now like, it's like your client feels like, it's like, well, we're spending all this time working on my freaking ankle, which maybe that's exactly what they need. But integrating it into like a normal training session can be a little bit challenging. So how do you ensure that your client is getting a little bit of like anterior tibialis activation? Well, let's say they're doing a balance exercise, right? Let's say they're doing a a single leg balance with reach, right? Or let's say they're doing, just like a single leg lift and chop. Well, you've got the opportunity to tell your client, hey, I really do want you to focus on doing like a good lift and chop. But if you can also say, like, while you're lifting your leg up, I want you to, don't have this like lazy foot here. I want you to pull that toe up, right? Activate that anterior tibialis as best you can. Pull your toes towards your face. Anytime you've got your client standing on one leg, it's a pretty good opportunity for them to pull that anterior tibialis muscle, pull those toes towards your face. And it's a very dynamic way to kind of engage that. Rather than spending a ton of time kind of just working on this bands. If your client's paying you to do that, great, but sometimes like it can be one of those things where your client doesn't feel like they're getting their money's worth because it's not really going to make them sweat. It's not going to make them burn a ton of calories. If they have a weight loss client, especially, this might be something that is incredibly important that they don't necessarily want to prioritize. So we have to find a way to kind of sneak it into the routines. One of the best ways to do that is during balance exercises, have them pull their toes up. So that is if your client, if you put the plates under the heels and all of a sudden the problem went away and you realize that excessive lean was the soleus and the gastrocnemius, great. That's how we're going to fix it, right? We're going to foam roll the calves, and then we are going to stretch the calves. Then we are going to put a band around their foot and have them pull their toes towards them. And then we'll have them do a series of balance exercises where they're also pulling their toes towards them. So any questions on that, guys? Feel pretty confident? All right, so let's take a look at our program here that we've got. In this version, we elevated our client's heels and they still leaned forward. So in the version we've got an example for here, our client does not have ankle dysfunction. They have lumbopelvic hip dysfunction. So when they excessively leaned, we saw tight hip flexors, we saw tight abdominals, right? And we see weak gluteus muscles, which your glutes, exact opposite of your hip flexors, right? Hips are on one side, glutes are on the other. And then opposite of your abdominals are your lumbar extensors. So this is that, we say lumbar extensors, we are talking about the erector spinae, right? So now that erector spinae muscle is back, but this time it is on our underactive muscles list. This used to cause our low back arch. This used to be one of our tight muscles. Well, now it's a weak muscle for this type of client, right? So we are going to focus on doing a lot of spinal extension movements, back extensions, supermans, things like that, where we are going to engage that low back musculature and get them to increase the arch in their low back. So that's the program, right? We're gonna stretch out the hip flexors. We're going to stretch out the abdominals, and then we're going to turn on their glutes and their lumbar extensors. So for foam rolling, pretty easy list, right? We're just going to see the hip flexor complex and the tensor fascia latae, right? We see, your rectus femoris, which is that hip flexor on the front of the thigh, right? You're going to place that foam roller basically right below that knob on the front of your pelvis, but still above your quadriceps. And we're going to place that foam roller right in this area right here. And hopefully that's going to loosen up their rectus femoris, right? But then we're also going to place it on the tensor fascia latae. That TFL muscle. Then we just move the foam roller from the front of the hip slightly over to the side. So SMR hip flexors looks kind of like this, right in the front. And then SMRing your TFL is where we just turn slightly to the side, right? We just get into the side of the hip. Very, very similar to one another, right? They're right next door. But one is the front and one is the side. So there we go. We foam roll those out. And then we're going to do a static kneeling hip flexor stretch, which is that classic sort of just going straight forward hip flexor stretch, right? We're seeing this version here. And he's going to squeeze his glute, right? Keeping his pelvis into a neutral position, squeezing the glute here. That's going to stretch out this hip flexor, right? Because, you know, this is pulling this leg into hip extension. You can also do that by taking the arm up as well. And then you're going to get into your iliopsoas a little bit better. If my client's an excessive leaner, I definitely want to get into this arm pull because it's likely in the abdominals where we're going to have that problem. So this right here is exactly what we're looking for. She lunges forward, drawing her hip into extension slightly, and then she does just a little bit of a turn and a little bit of a lean there. If your client has trouble with the turning action with their balance, you don't have to do it. You can just do the lean. But that's going to get into that hip flexor there, right? Thighs nice and straight, thighs in a slight extension. So that's our kneeling hip flexor stretch. And then we're going to follow it up with the TFL stretch, right? The TFL stretch that we saw the other day is going to show up again, right? Where we do that standing TFL. Again, the leg goes back. That muscle also likes to do internal rotation. So we do a slight external rotation here. And then we take the arm up. And there we go, right? Now our client is in that great TFL position. So we're going to do both of those stretches. Then it's kind of nice. We're going to get into a static Cobra stretch. So we're going to actually stretch out that low, those abdominals, right? I don't have an ASM version. All right, that's fine. We'll just look at pictures then. So your Cobra stretch is that classic like arching action here, right? So we're seeing this version. Now, I will say, if you see this with your clients like hips popping up off the floor, that's showing that this is, you know, really kind of tight on one side. Make sure you are sort of pressing your hips and belly down towards the floor and drawing your shoulder blades back. That's what we want to see in a good kind of Cobra pose, versus kind of what we're seeing here, where now there's just like a lot of pressure coming down onto his disc. There's just like a lot of gravity there. And so this is definitely a little bit, this guy's abs are definitely a little bit tight. They're kind of resisting that movement. Now you can also do one of my favorite versions. If you have a client who is having a really hard time doing a good Cobra, because maybe they just don't have great back extension, you can also do what's called a Sphinx stretch, which is exactly the same thing, except that you're going to do it with elbows down. And so by taking the elbows down like this, you can still kind of stretch out that low back. And you can kind of pull your elbows like towards your back, you know, pull your elbows backwards, and that's going to stretch this out without putting as much pressure upwards. So here you can see, actually, this is great. This is both of them, right? There is your sort of Cobra stretch. If you've got great mobility, go for it. But if that's a little bit of a struggle, you can always do the Sphinx stretch instead. Both of those are really good. In this version, we've got the Cobra. And then we're going to stretch out, that's going to stretch out the rectus abdominis, right? Remember, your rectus abdominis wants to do spinal flexion. So we've been drawing it into spinal extension. So that's turning off those ab muscles that are crunching us too far forward. Now we're going to do a static supine twist, which is going to stretch out our obliques along with your erector spinae. But we'll do a little bit of a twist action right here. And that's going to stretch your obliques on opposite sides to one another. Okay. So there we go. That is going to work on the leaning action, the pulling us forward. Throw them on the treadmill for 5 minutes, get their blood pumping. Now we need to activate all of those antagonistic muscles, right? The gluteus maximus, the lumbar extensors, right? So we are going to do an isoprone cobra. Right, that classic floor prone cobra where your client is going to do a little bit of spinal extension. I will say, if I've got this, this is where NASM loves the prone cobra because it's really good for your low back, but it also activates the muscles between your shoulder blades. I will say, if your priority is your erector spinae, the Superman exercise might actually be a little bit more appropriate in this version. So in this version, you'll take your arms forward instead, and have them lift simultaneously. Again, I don't like the head action. She's lifting her head up. You do not need to do that. That does nothing for you. Just keep your head in a neutral position, looking straight down. But in this version, you can lift the legs and the arms simultaneously. So she did her arms, then she did her legs. Now she'll do both, hopefully. Come on, lady. There we go. So we see both of them come up. Again, don't do the head. Do not do the head motion. That does nothing for you. Everybody freaking does that, but you really do not need to bring your head up. Actually, I think this is a better demo. Yeah, there we go. Neutral, right? That, good Lord, that's a great Superman, actually. That lady has some serious spinal extension. I am jealous. I do not have that much myself. So lifting both those simultaneously, I would honestly call that a better option, but that option is not in your textbook, and all of these exercise choices are textbook versions. Now, we are going to do the side iso abs here, which is basically, it's more commonly known as like a side plank. Not with abduction. Now, you might think that that would activate your oblique muscles, and you'd be right, but it's going to activate your internal oblique muscles instead of your external oblique muscles. So, you know, we aren't worried about doing a side plank here causing us to excessively lean. We're seeing that this is going to help us stabilize the spine. So there's your side plank. NASM likes to call it the side iso abs. So now, we've activated some of our underactive muscles, right? We've worked on the lumbar extensors. We're getting a little bit of glute work in the side iso abs, although not a lot. But now we can do the single leg, opposite arm, opposite leg raise, that bird dog action. Right, which is going to be really great for working on those glute muscles, right? So we're getting a little bit of balance here, and we're getting a really good glute activation, right? That quadruped opposite arm, opposite leg raise. Gluteus maximus is underactive for our client. So we drive the leg into extension, we're going to activate that. And then the box jump to stabilization, right? We jump up onto a box and we hold our landing for 3 to 5 seconds. She does not hold her landings, which drives me insane every time I show this video, but 3 to 5 second hold. And now we're getting a little bit more gluteus maximus activation there. So that is your core balance reactive for a client with excessive lean. Could I have done floor bridges? Yeah, sure. Could I have done a single leg lift and chop? Yeah, if I wanted to, right? There's a lot of options out there, guys, but these are sort of just example versions. And I know we're kind of, we're honestly out of content today, guys. That's about all I got for you. Any questions on tight hips? Feeling good?
Yeah.
All right.
No.
What's that?
No.
No.
I'm gonna embarrass myself, but Brad, I had no clue as to what we're doing. Like, you know, as I'm going along, I don't know what the goal is. I didn't know that we were going to be learning to I didn't know what we were doing. Like, and then looking to correct these or how to do a program for somebody. I didn't know all this. I just know that I'm learning different things, but I didn't know that we were going to apply it to, like, this is all, I know I sound stupid, but I didn't know what we're doing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Kind of.
Well, I didn't know. I don't see. All I know is I'm learning the different muscles, and like I don't know what that we're learning.
So
We're learning different assessments, and that we're going to make a program, and then we have to know all these different exercises. That I'm just learning about the exercises that I don't, to counteract the weakness.
yes, so that's what we do, right? Like that's our what we do as a trainer, right? We need to assess someone and figure out like what's going on with them. And then once we know what their alterations in their postures are or what their deficiencies are, we address those by, filling in their gaps, fixing like whatever it is. If they're really tight, we're going to make it not so tight anymore. If they're really weak, we're going to strengthen it, right? And so that's what we're looking at. That's the purpose of the overhead squat. And that's what this career is, right? We look at these overactive, underactive muscles and we address them. The overactive stuff through stretching techniques and mobility exercises. The underactive stuff through strengthening techniques and activation exercises, right?
Yeah.
And the places where we apply those things, we apply the overactive stretching stuff in the warm-up. We apply the underactive activation stuff in the movement prep. That's why it's called that. And I know it seems really overwhelming. It is a large list of muscles. Absolutely. And we've only got kind of 12 days to kind of go over them, right? But like I said, like this is the stuff that comes back every single module. We're going to take a little bit of a break from some of this posture stuff, starting on Friday. Friday, we're starting our next course, where we'll take a little bit of a break from all this muscle stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about the training industry, how to get hired, how to start your own business, things like that, how to do sales. Then we're going to come back to writing programs and coming up with routines to address our clients' deficiencies. After that, after we give you a little bit of a brain cool down, the next class is a little bit gentler when it comes to all that stuff. And then that'll be the end of our module, and we're going to kind of start from the top again. And go over it again and again and again.
Okay.
So,
all right. See, I was just like, just putting like ABC together. I know I sound ridiculous, but I did not know like all this. That's what our career is. Let's put it that way.
Well,
so,
I mean, think about like a doctor, right? If you went to the doctor and you're like, I've got a stomach ache, and they'd be, they're not just going to go, all right, we'll take some Tums, like, they're going to go, all right, well, let's do a stomach acid test. Let's test your blood work. They're going to do a bunch of assessments. Then they're going to go, oh, you have, we can see there's stomach acid, you're in your blood, right? And it's like, you've got an ulcer, right? Your stomach acid is leaking into your blood. Yeah, that's causing your stomach ache. You got heartburn, basically. So they're gonna figure out, they gotta do some tests to diagnose like what's wrong. We do the same thing. Look at a mechanic, right?
Okay, cool.
What's that?
Okay, cool. I feel stupid, but
No, don't at all. It is very overwhelming in the beginning. Trust me.
Well, it's like elementary, but I just had to see like the whole thing.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
it's a 3-step process. It's like I always tell people. It's just like a mechanic, right? You bring your car in, like it's making this clunking sound, and And I go, okay. They hook it up to a computer and they go, oh, yeah, I know nothing about cars. Something is broken. And so then they, be like, all right, well, then they order the part and then they throw it into your car and suddenly your car is fixed. And it cost $1 billion.
Okay.
So.
Thank you so much.
No problem. All right, guys. So today was our final lesson in PFT 101. We are meeting tomorrow at Sochi. We're going to go over some cardio stuff. If you guys have questions, if you're really worried about stuff, posture things, you want to talk more about them and take a look at the overhead squat, we'll definitely do a little bit of that tomorrow. We'll also do our performance assessments. I want to take you guys through the Davies test and the shark skill test, which is really fun. So we'll get a chance to kind of practice that tomorrow. That'll be a blast. Especially because, you get to kind of compete against your fellow students. It's always kind of a good time. And yeah, that'll be what we're going to go through. We're going to work our way through the stuff we didn't get to finish last time. And then we'll have our final exam in this class up. There'll be a review video like always, and we'll move into sales / how to start your own business, which will be kind of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. It'll be a brain cool down, trust me. The next class is really gentle. The 8-day classes are always meant to be this moment that we're having right now.
Plus my world is spinning in vertigo, so it doesn't help.
Yeah, I'm sure that with everything spinning around you, it doesn't exactly help.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we'll go ahead and wrap it up today, and I will see you guys tomorrow in person.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.